You're listening to another episode of Badass Mums.
I'm Tneek, a female rapper and bid professional.
I'm Shahlaa Tahira, presenter and content creator.
And I'm Cilla, singer-songwriter and all-round creative.
Together, we are Badass Mums.
Welcome back to another episode of Badass Mums. Today we have a very, very special episode. We're joined by Pregnant Then Screwed. They're a charity who are supporting thousands and thousands of women every year, campaigning against discrimination. We're joined by Joeli, the founder, and we're going to have an amazing chat. How are you?
Okay.
Hey. Hello, ladies. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm doing really well today. We've got it's glorious weather, and we're all happy. And I'm having a lovely chat with you three.
Oh,
That's
thank you.
amazing.
You are literally like the childcare warrior of the UK. Like activists out there fighting for us mums, and it's so funny because Tneek's literally had no childcare cancelled on her today, so I feel like it's very fitting we have little Ruben in the studio today.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, this happens a lot. Every time I see mums and talk to them about what's going on, there's always somebody having a childcare nightmare, which, obviously perfectly demonstrates why we need to fix our childcare system.
Yeah,
Definitely. And I've seen your most recent campaign has shifted. I'm upset it's not till next year because my son will then be free. But you've actually got the government to pay attention and listen to you guys and make some changes.
Yeah, I mean, we really hadn't expected what happened on the 16th of March to happen. We've been campaigning on childcare for a long time now, 6-7 years, and I really thought we were in it for the long haul. I thought it was going to be probably another 3 years before we saw anything significant happen. But yeah, on the 16th of March, Jeremy Hunt announced that they're going to be reducing childcare costs for parents with children from the age of 9 months old by the 30 hours funded childcare scheme will start to work from the age of 9 months within the next 2 years, which honestly, I mean, it blew my mind. I had a little cry when he announced it. It's not perfect. There's loads of problems with it, which we can talk about, but it's a massive leap in the right direction, and it will absolutely reduce costs for the majority of parents, which is, incredible.
definitely.
Because I heard we're top 3 in the world as far as how expensive our childcare is. That's what I was told
Crazy.
recently.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so
crazy.
in the OECD countries, which are all the wealthiest nations, so the 40 wealthiest nations, we flip between the most expensive childcare system in the world and the third most expensive childcare system in the world, depending on how you cut the data. And obviously things are getting worse before they're going to get better because of interest rates and because, costs are increasing constantly for parents right now who are wading through this treacle at the moment because those 30 funded hours won't kick in until April next year. So so things are really tough right now.
Yeah.
And why do you think that we just so happen to be the most expensive? Why do you think that is the case?
Well, I mean, I can tell you exactly why it is. It's because under David Cameron, so about almost 10 years ago, David Cameron wanted to be the Prime Minister. And so he said, right, if you make me Prime Minister, I will give all 3 and 4-year-olds 30 hours of free childcare a week. And it was obviously a ploy to get as many votes as possible. He got in, so he had to fulfill that pledge. But what they did was purposefully underfund it. And we know this because there was a freedom of information request because providers kept saying, hold on a minute, this isn't enough money. This doesn't make sense. And the government kept saying, no, you're fine. No, it's loads of money. No, nothing to complain about. So they did a freedom of information request, and that showed that they purposefully underfunded the scheme by almost £3 per child per hour. And in that meeting, they said, we know this is underfunded, and so we know that they're going to have to pass the costs down the chain to younger children in order to stay open. And that means that more mothers in particular will have to leave the labour market because they won't be able to afford to pay for childcare. All of this is documented in that meeting, and we only found it out because of a Freedom of Information request. So because childcare providers are having to cross-subsidise by charging more money for younger children, obviously it's massively inflated the costs for when you've got kids from 9 months to say 3 years old, the term after you turn 3. And then because that funding hasn't increased in line with inflation, those costs just keep increasing, and so they're having to be passed on to parents. So that's why it's really expensive.
That's dreadful. What I was interested to know, what motivated you to start Pregnant Then Screwed?
So when I was 4 months pregnant with my first baby, I told my employer that I was pregnant. I sent them an email and said, look, I'm pregnant and it's going to affect the project that I'm working on, but don't worry, I've got a plan. We're going to sort it all out. And the next day they called me. I didn't answer the phone because I was brushing my teeth, and they left a voicemail saying, your contract is going to be pulled. Please hand everything over immediately. My employer was a children's charity. So I listened to the voicemail and obviously immediately knew what was going on because there'd been no problems before that. Everything was fine. Yeah. Just panicked. Like, I went into total meltdown. I called my mum. Obviously she didn't know what to do. I called my partner's stepdad, who was a lawyer, but he's a property lawyer, so he had no idea what to do. I was just like completely panicking because that was it. Like, then, they clearly had just pulled all of my work, so I had no income. I didn't know where I was going to get any money from because I was 4 months pregnant. Nobody was going to employ me. I then found out that week that I was having a high risk pregnancy. I think the shock of losing. I think the shock.
Everything at once.
Yeah, that was it. I mean, it was the darkest time. Like, I went in for a routine appointment. They checked my cervix and they were like, your cervix is almost gone. Like, you could go into labour right now. And if you go into labour right now, the baby's going to die. Like, the baby's not going to survive. So they rushed me into surgery the next day to try and keep everything in place, like bolt everything together. And when I was recovering, they said, look, that this may not work. It's only got about a 25% success rate. So what you've got to do is reduce stress in your life, because stress is the thing that will trigger early labour. You've just got to rest and no stress in your life. Obviously, I just lost my job, and I could take them to tribunal, but that is like pretty much the most stressful thing you can do. So I suddenly found myself lying on a sofa, no job, no income, was totally reliant on my partner to pay my rent, to keep food on the table. I've gone from being completely independent, having a career, really excited about having a baby, to nothing. Like, overnight, nothing. The rug had been pulled from under me. I had nothing. And thinking that the baby was going to die. I was rubbing my belly, begging this baby to stay put, thinking all I'm now good for is a vessel for this growing fetus, and I'm failing at that, not even doing that very well. And it just radicalized me. Those 3 weeks of lying on a sofa just changed my perspective on everything. And I was fine, baby was fine. I ended up getting another great job. Everything worked out really well in the end. But because of the trauma of that period, it never left me. I was so angry that the justice system had failed me. My employer had shafted me and was going to get away with it. And so for the next year, I kept thinking of revenge tactics. Like,
I don't blame you, honestly.
I was like, I'll post them a poo through their letterbox, or like all sorts of revenge tactics. And then I was thinking, that's not going to make me feel any better. And eventually I came up with the name Pregnant Then Screwed. And one day I just got up with the baby and thought, right, I'm going to set up a website and see what happens. And I taught myself how to use WordPress, set up this website, and it went from there. So it was I never had a plan. I just set up this website, put my story on it, put a couple of stories of friends on it, and it's just mushroomed from there and grown into now a fully functioning charity with 10 employees, 170 volunteers. This year we expect to support 10,000 women. We're doing all of this campaigning, but it's just, there was never a plan, if I'm honest. It wasn't, I'm going to end up here. It just slowly grew, and we are where we are.
That's beautiful to hear, like such a positive outcome from what started so negative, and also that is your miracle baby.
Yeah, definitely.
Like honestly, that fear of you've already got your own personal fear of like work, and obviously the expense of now you're gonna have to buy all these things for this new baby, but the fear of like something happening to your unborn child, I know is unmatched, and well done you for like surviving that, and him for surviving it as well. Like I feel like you're in it together.
Yeah. He's now a very healthy 9-year-old. So he was fine. There were no issues in the end, but the stress of every day thinking that he could die every single day, monitoring every movement, is intense. It's so intense. And I had really bad postnatal depression, and I think that was part of it. It was the trauma of all of those things compounded together. Yeah. So that's depressing, isn't it? But on a happy note, like 2 miracle babies came out of it. My son and Pregnant Then Screwed.
Yeah. So what about a single mother, if she was in your position and, she had been forced out of work and didn't have somebody to rely on financially? What would be the best route for someone who's in that position where they haven't got someone, like, for instance, like a partner to help them financially with the rent, with, covering her bills and expenses? In that case scenario, what would you say would be the best thing to do?
Yeah, well, this is the thing, right? I mean, I had enormous amounts of privilege in that I had a partner. I also had, I was in a position where I could do something about it, talk about it publicly, because I didn't have a non-disclosure agreement tying me over. I wasn't worried about my future job prospects. I wasn't like tied to the charity sector at the time. So I had people that could help me. I had enormous amounts of privilege, and so that was a big driver for me of like, wow, what would have happened if I'd have been disabled, if I'd have been a single parent, and so back then there really was nothing like Pregnant Then Screwed. And so now I would say to any parent that goes through this, any woman that goes through this, to contact us immediately, because this is what we're there for. So we can talk them through what their legal rights are and what the next stages are, what they should do in order to ensure they don't get shafted, they don't get treated like crap. But at the same time, I had lost my income. I had no income. And so, you'd have to go on benefits. That would be your only solution, and that isn't a solution.
Yeah.
So it's, sadly, I've had stories from women who this happens to and they end up homeless. And that's devastating. And I mean, there is no system built in by the government that catches those women and helps them in the way that they need to be helped, and that's why it's so important we fix the underlying issues.
Crazy living in like a place like the UK that these stories still happen. Do you know what I mean? Like in third world countries, it's not expected, but it's a bit more like, okay, the resource isn't there. But it is sad to hear that like in a country like this, there's still women going through just their basic needs not being able to be met because of like an annoyed employer, or do you know what I mean? Like it's insane to me.
I mean, we're really far behind other countries on lots of things, like on childcare, on flexible working, on paternity leave, like way behind other countries. But I often, as well, if we want to feel good about ourselves, it's worth looking at America because America is a
Could be
mess.
worse.
Like, it's barbaric. 1 in 4 women go back to work after 10 days after having a baby in America, because there's no standard maternity, and there's no holiday entitlement. Like don't have maternity rights, you don't have holiday entitlement, and if you lose your job when you're pregnant, you have to pay to have a baby because they don't have a national health service, and you lose your health insurance. So it's about $40,000 to just give birth in a safe.
Yeah, America's no joke.
That's making me feel sick.
They're no joke over there. So why do you think there's this big stigma with employers where they feel like essentially if you get pregnant, then essentially, quote unquote, you're unfit? Why do you think that mentality is there to begin with?
Yeah, I mean, there's loads of evidence that shows that from the point that you get pregnant, employees see you as distracted and uncommitted to your work, even though your work ethic won't have changed and you'll still be doing what you were doing previously. They did this experiment where they sent CVs out to employers, and the only thing that changed on the CVs was parental status, and they found that mums on average were offered, if they were offered a job, it was offered at $10,000 below that of any other type of employee, even though nothing had changed, like nothing about their skills or their experience had changed. They offered them, it's $10,000 less. So I think the reason why that exists is because bias, because we intrinsically believe, even if we don't admit it to ourselves, that women should be at home caring, that their child should be their priority. And so how can you have 2 priorities, work and children? You should be at home fluffing up cushions and baking cakes and, caring about that baby. And they found that if you come back to work, if women come back to work after their full maternity leave entitlement, that it looks like they don't care about their job. If they come back to work before their full maternity leave entitlement, then it looks like they're not caring. They don't care about people or children. So you can't win. Like, you literally cannot win. But the whole system is set up to ensure that it's women that do the majority of the care work. So that enhances that bias, because we have a parental leave system that ensures it's women that take long periods of time out of work. Men don't. We have a childcare system that means that it's really unaffordable for the majority of families to use it. And so when women come back to work, the majority say, I need to work flexibly or part-time. Men don't. They don't do that. Women do. And so if we could fix the parental leave system, so it's like other countries, so men are more likely to take some time out, then that would change things significantly. That would have a massive impact on the way that we view gendered roles at home and at work, because if you could make it so that men were likely as well to take long periods of time out of work, and that they were just as responsible for kids as women are, then that bias would start to dissipate. And we see that in countries like Sweden that encouraged us to take time out.
It's definitely not encouraged here because, firstly, that's why Badass Mums was formed, to normalise working and having a family.
Yeah, definitely.
But also, even with my own children's dad, I remember saying to him with Rio, because I went back after 6 months with my son compared to my daughter, I took the whole year. Because I was the breadwinner, so I felt like I just changed jobs. I needed the money, and you know what? Nah, it's okay. 6 months is long enough, kind of. And I remember saying to him, you should take the 6 months. It will save us on childcare, and I'll be able to cover all the bills. And he was so adamant that even though he's a very hands-on dad, he does school runs. He he's very much an equal parent. It's not like I'm the dominant parent, but he insisted, no, I cannot. My pride, my ego will not let me be the one at home with the child and you're working. And it was, at the time, I wanted to punch him because I was just like, we're paying for childcare and you're earning less than me. Like, it was just didn't make any logical sense, but his emotions and his ego took over.
Yeah.
And I think you're right about that in the UK. There is this kind of like stigma around, what? The dad's at home? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, it's because so few dads take time out to care for their kids. When they try to do that, they're often met with discrimination and disadvantage from their employer. So we know that you're much more likely to have a flexible working request rejected if you're a man than if you're a woman, like twice as likely to have it rejected. And we've had stories where like men have asked for shared parental leave and their employer then writes to them and starts the email with "hello nanny," like just really sort of humiliating, rude, like one employer said to a man that asked for shared parental leave, "Shall I buy you a dress while you're at it?" Like, just like,
and this is why they're not going to ask.
No.
They don't want to be that man in the office, like being talked about.
Absolutely disrespectful. Right.
But if you change the system, and all other countries approve this, if you change it so that paternity leave is ring fenced, so it's on a use it or lose it basis, you can't transfer it to anybody else, and you pay it at 90% of salary or 80% or above, dads take time out in the droves. Like loads of dads take time out because they actually really want to spend. I mean, mad, wanting to spend time with your own kids, like
Your own child.
yeah. Of course, they want to spend time with their own kids. They're just prevented from doing so because of the current system. So people believe that dads don't want to, but they do. Every country's proved this, that's done it, that's created a system that works for dads. They then take time out, and then that bias just vanishes because it's seen as normal.
So essentially, I guess if we work through the issue of parental leave, that would have a knock-on effect as far as like the entire family's well-being. A man could be more present for his children, and that will actually help the mother, be able to take on more.
And also, I won't have to tell you how to do this or how to do that. You'll just know.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true.
Take a lot of pressure off me.
That's it, isn't it? Babies don't come with a manual. You've got to learn on the job and you figure it out as you go. So this is where the problem happens. The mother takes all this time out. She figures out how to do stuff. She learns on the job. And then when the dad tries to do stuff, he can't do it because he hasn't done the learning. And so he's constantly going, how do I do that? Oh, could you just do that? Oh, I don't understand, whatever it is. And so you don't get a break. Because you're the one on all the time. You're working and you're the one that understands how to do all of the stuff that they don't get. So we know from research that if dads take time out in those early days on their own without the mother being around, it massively reduces the unpaid labour gap, because obviously women do 3 times the unpaid labour that men do, but it really shrinks that because they're learning on the job. It reduces the divorce rate. This is staggering.
I can imagine.
Wow.
It reduces the divorce rate by 40%.
Wow.
40%. If dads spend time on their own with their kids in those early days. It's really good for kids. They do better in the education system, and it's really good for mums. They have better mental and physical health, and their for every month of paternity leave taken by men, women's salaries rise by 7%.
Yeah. Because they're there in the office proving their worth and their value and being able to actually focus on what they're doing. I feel like that's part of the problem when you're doing this kind of flexi work and your mind's always half at work, half with the kids. Yeah.
Like now.
That's the need right now.
Yeah.
Literally.
Oh, gosh. Wow. So talk to us more about, because you're saying there's some development with parental leave. That's some things that might change.
Well, we don't know what will change. We're really hoping. Obviously, we've got a general election coming up in, could be anywhere up to 18 months' time, and it's very likely at the moment we'll have a change of government. We won't have the same government. What that government looks like, who knows? But we, in the build up to the next general election, are really focusing in on trying to get in manifestos 6 weeks paternity leave at 90% of salary, because we think it'll be a game changer in terms of the stuff that we've just talked about. There've been some good noises from the Labour Party on reforming parental leave, but nothing concrete as yet. So we've been doing some research with the Centre for Progressive Policy, looking at, because of course most political parties will only do something if it makes economic sense, because under Jeremy Corbyn made all these promises. The public do not trust the Labour Party with the economy. So the Labour Party will only do stuff if they can prove it makes economic sense. The Conservatives have always been like that. They'll only do anything if it makes economic sense. So you've got to make an economic argument when you're campaigning on stuff, is our viewpoint. So we've been doing some research to try and work out the benefits for the economy if you increase paternity leave. And we know that taxpayers spend about £9 billion on perinatal mental health issues. £9 billion. And that's on treatment for perinatal mental health issues, but ongoing issues related to mental health if they're not dealt with straight away. And of course, mental health issues also impact productivity. You're not as productive at work. So there's £9 billion there that could be reduced if you give dads proper paternity leave, because we know for a fact that if dads take time out, a mother's mental health is better. She has much higher rates of mental health and physical health. She's much less likely to end up with physical health issues if a dad takes time out in those early days. As well as that, we now know that all countries that have 6 weeks paternity leave at 90% of salary have a smaller gender pay gap and a smaller labour force participation gap. So we can say without a doubt that this is really good for women and for improving gender equality. And we know that reducing the gender pay gap has economic benefits. If we reduce the employment gap across the UK, the benefit will be £28 billion. So there is a massive economic argument here for increasing paternity leave. So that's our job now, is to keep pushing that and saying to the government, yes, it's going to cost you to do it. We estimate it'll cost between 1 billion and 1.6 billion. But look at all these benefits. Look how exciting this is. If you want to excite the electorate, if you want to give them hope for the future, if you want to say, look at this world that we can create for you, and if you want to compete with other forward-thinking nations, there you go, paternity leave. That's how you do it.
Yeah. And it sounds so simple as well. Why is it not already happening?
I know, yeah.
What you touched on about women's physical and mental health kind of taking a hit because obviously they're just juggling so much. And it took to Rio almost being 2 for me to, for the first time since becoming a mum, be like, I need some me time. I remember as a therapist who said to me, what do you do for yourself? And I was like, I love my job. And she's like, that's not for you. And it's like, when I like washing up, it's quite very. She's like, no. What do you do that's for no one, no benefit, but just enjoyment? And that's when I realised between home, work, the kids, their dad, it was like, oh my God, I actually don't do anything for myself. And since I've started doing it, I'm so much happier, in every area of my life.
So critical.
And I think that's such a good thing you point out, because I think so many mums put so much pressure on ourselves to be the best mums or to prove to the employer that we can still work and have a family. And we get lost in all of it as an individual, and we forget about us a lot.
Yeah, and I think that's so important to talk about. And from a really young age, I think as girls, it's constantly expected that we will give and not take. And we're told to be nice and smile. And, we know that girls do more chores than boys when they're younger. They get less pocket money than boys when they're younger. There's just this constant pressure on.
I'm not doing that in my household. I'm gonna make everything equal.
Yeah. I've had my boys with marigolds on cleaning the bog recently, because I was like, going to learn to be, to do the work that you should, the fair share of the household work. So I think we just have that. And I think societal pressure tells us that, if somebody comes around to our house and our house is a mess, we feel guilty. We feel like we've done something wrong. Like my partner doesn't, they couldn't care less. But I know I am constantly thinking, oh my word, like this is really embarrassing. And so we have this constant pressure on us to be perfect, and it's absolutely impossible, and it means we burn ourselves out because we're trying to do 2 full-time jobs. Often we're trying to do nearly all of the housework, and we're trying to work full-time or whatever it is. And all the research shows that I mean, back in the 70s, women did less paid labour and they did less unpaid labour. They spent less time with their kids than we do now. So we're literally trying to do it all. We're trying to work more hours, be the breadwinner, and we've got this constant pressure to spend quality time with our kids all the time, so the pressure is absolutely enormous. But we know again from research that spending time on yourself and doing something that's good for you has more benefits for your children than spending quality time with them, because you can't do that unless you look after yourself. So it's really, really important that we do stop and go, what do I want?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And what advice would you give working mums when they're negotiating, maybe more flexi hours with an employer, or starting a bit later because of the school run? Because I feel like just that pressure alone, that the school, it's not set up for working mums. Like the time the school finishes, the time the school starts, the time the working day starts.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone who's a bit anxious about approaching their employer and trying to get a bit more flexibility in how they work, but still work full time?
I would say to them to suggest a trial to begin with, and that usually gets over a few hurdles, because if you have asking for flexible working is a legal process. If you give them a request to work flexibly, you enter a legal negotiation. So they have to respond within a certain amount of time, and they have to respond within a certain way. If they reject that request, then you can appeal, but again, you're going through legal processes. I think a better way of doing it is taking it out of that legal process first and having an open conversation with either the person that makes the decision or a person close to the person that makes a decision about what it is you need, and suggest that you try it. Say, can we just maybe try it for 3 months and evaluate whether it's worked or not? Because once they try it and give it a go, they're more likely to then accept your request when you submit it. And you can only make one official flexible working request a year. So once you've made that request, if it's then rejected and rejected again on appeal, you can't make another one for a year. So it's best to do the negotiating work first and then go in with your full request. And I think you can always call us, and we are there to help, and we can give you the arguments that you need, and we can tell you how to make that flexible working request so it stands you in good stead legally. But I would always suggest a trial to begin with. I think that tends to work quite well.
So what kind of support do you offer women that kind of need, I guess, your help? Would it be information you provide, or would it be a conversation?
We have a free advice line, which the number is 0161 222 9879. It's literally the only phone number I know.
And we'll make sure we put that on the screen.
Brilliant, thank you. So if you need anything, any advice, if you're having trouble at work, if you've been made redundant, if you've been pushed out of your job like I was, if you're being bullied or harassed, if you say have returned from maternity leave and they're keeping your maternity cover and they've demoted you, if they're pushing you out of conversations, they're not giving you training, anything like that, call us and you will speak to a lovely HR professional, highly trained HR professional first. if you explicitly need legal advice, then they will get one of our lawyers to call you back, and they will give you free legal advice and tell you what your legal rights are and what you should do next. If it's anything related to benefits, so if you're struggling financially, if you're in a real hole and you think you might be missing out on benefits, there's a high likelihood that you are, because the benefit system is so complicated. So we have a free benefit service as well, and they will tell you what you're entitled to. If you say haven't received your maternity pay, or any other benefit related to that, then our HR professionals will talk you through it, and we'll also give you advice on flexible working. If you want to take legal action against your employer, which is incredibly stressful and really difficult, we've got mentors that will help you through that process. So there are women who have been through their own process of taking legal action, have often been to tribunal, and they'll support you more as a friend and somebody who gets it and has been there and who can signpost you and tell you what to expect. But just that peer-to-peer support is enormous when you're going through something that difficult. So we pair you up with somebody and they help you. And we also have a mental health line, which we run with Mind. So if you're struggling mentally, which I know I was, and I had nowhere to turn, and discrimination of any kind will affect your mental health. So give us a call and we can help you with that as well.
That's amazing. Like, there's so many
Different
options.
routes.
Yeah, whether it's legal advice, whether it's someone who gets what you're going through. I just want to put a disclaimer: this is a UK service, because we have a lot of listeners in the States. But who knows? Maybe next the world.
Yeah, well, you never know. Yeah, first UK, next America. Watch out for us, Hollywood.
Any other?
I was going to say, statistically, how many women, do you know of, or do you know, have taken cases to trial and tribunal and have actually won? Do you know?
It's a tiny proportion. Fewer than 1% of women who experience discrimination even raise a claim. And when you raise a claim, what tends to happen is your employer craps themselves and thinks, I don't want this to be in the press. But they draw it out. So they'll use very careful bullying tactics to try and get you to drop the case. So they say things, we often hear of women being told by their employer, well, if you lose the case, I'm going to come after you for costs, and my costs are going to be over 100 grand. Ignore that. Ignore the bullying. They're doing it on purpose to try and make you and force you to drop the case, and most of the stuff they say is not true. They can't do it. So this is why it's really good to have a mentor, because the mentor can be like, ignore that, like they're just bullying you. But what tends to happen is just before the legal case, they will offer you a settlement that is often a bit more than what you would get at tribunal, but they make you sign a non-disclosure agreement. So non-disclosure agreements, gagging clauses that mean you cannot tell anybody what's happened. The only people you're allowed to speak to are your spouse and your lawyer about what's happened. And though they're so damaging, because we know from our research with women who've signed one, it has such an impact on their mental health, because they feel like they've done something wrong and they can't tell anybody about their trauma. They've just got to keep their mouth shut, and they constantly feel like they've got this dagger hanging over their heads, like, what if I slip up? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I go for a job and they ask me why I left? Like, all of that just hangs over them like a dark cloud. And so, yeah, it has really damaging effects on women, particularly if, the discrimination has been really traumatic, and often it is. And then these bullying tactics happen afterwards. So it's a tiny proportion. And then even when you get to tribunal, it often can be really hard to prove, because a lot of it happens behind closed doors with the curtains closed. They don't document anything.
There's no.
There's conversations.
Yeah, exactly. They're like shred documents, and getting a witness to support what's happened is almost impossible, because the witness works for the company still. That witness would lose their job, obviously, if they stood up and defended you. So it's really difficult, and when women say they want to take legal action against their employer, obviously we're there for them and we support them, but we make sure that this is really what they want to do, because it's so tough. The legal system does not work for women. The justice system fails us at every turn, and it needs fixing desperately. But in the meantime, we do what we can to support them.
Living in the patriarchy.
Definitely. And overall, with like all of these issues, do you feel like that's why people are choosing to have less kids or no kids these days?
Yeah, because I remember you saying that there's some mums. I think it was like I can't remember what morning show you was on TV, but you were saying mums are actually wanting to have more children, but because of all the politics around working and having children and childcare, they're actually not, which is so upsetting to know someone would like their personal choice would be impacted by like outside forces.
Yeah, it's happening all the time, and it's predominantly childcare that's influencing it as well. So, I mean, I hear a lot from women who say they haven't got any kids and that they're much more aware that it will impact their career and their earnings, and that our work, has had this sort of empowering impact, but also a sad effect in that women are like, well, I'm quite scared of where this is going to go and what's going to happen. But we also know that women are not having kids because of our childcare system, because they can't afford it. So they have a kid, they go through the nightmare that is trying to get childcare and pay for childcare, and then they think, well, I can't do that again. Like, I can't afford to pay more than my mortgage or rent to have another kid.
When Ria was full time, it was about £1,800 a month, which is more than my rent. Like, it was just incredible. Like, I can't afford to feed him now. He better eat well at the nursery. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's insane, isn't it? Like, and the majority of mums say that it does not make financial sense for them to work. The majority say that because of childcare costs. And so we did some and it was the most devastating bit of research we've ever done, with 1,650 women who'd had an abortion in the last 5 years. And 6 in 10 told us that childcare costs were a factor in their decision to terminate their pregnancy, and that increased to 76% for Black women and for single women, for single mums. 1 in 5 told us that it was the reason they terminated what was otherwise a wanted pregnancy was because of childcare costs. I mean, what are we doing?
Awful. Like, absolutely awful.
I just couldn't. When the stats came back, I was like,
I totally understand that, because at one point when I wasn't working, I chose to be off work for a while.
Yeah.
I'm a single mum as well, and I had taken up some temporary work just to keep my mind busy, because at one stage I was like, I'm going mad, I'm in the house all day.
Yeah, just nappies and nipples. And
I was like, no, let me just quickly take something temporary, contracted, and just do that. And because I wasn't working before that or whatever, I had to rely on the benefits, the full benefits at that time. And the complication I had with the nursery and the job centre at the time, just to get the job centre to pay the childcare, I had to go to the job centre, sit down with them, go through a long form, then go back to the nursery. The nursery's a bit like, are they going to get it paid in time? Are you going to be able to? And they're stressing me out in the midst of this, and I'm literally trying to tell work, like, I'm trying to sort it out. And I had to rely on my dad to go and get him. The job centre took ages to pay them, and then the nursery were coming at me, and I was like, I'm going mad.
Yeah.
Literally. So yeah, I can understand that. And especially as a single mum, then now thinking, okay, in the future, if I go and have another child with someone, I don't know if I want to go through this again.
That stress again.
So then makes you start feeling like, I don't know if I can actually deal with having another child.
Yeah.
I mean, I totally understand that. Like 9 in 10 single mums are on universal credit. The average wage for a single parent is £15,000 a year, and so it just makes it it's impossible, isn't it? Like, completely impossible. Universal credit, thankfully, was part of the spring budget, and they are paying costs up front rather than you having to reclaim them, which makes a big difference. And they've increased the amount that you can apply for, but they've put in place new sanctions, work sanctions around it, which is mental, because all of the research shows that sanctions do not work. They don't work. Like the 2-child limit didn't work. It's just pushed more children into poverty. It didn't encourage people to go into work. It did no benefit whatsoever. So the sanctions are insane, and the situation for single parents is just mental. Like it makes me really cross when I start thinking about it, how it just entrenches poverty at every point, makes it impossible for single parents, the majority of them, to dig themselves out of poverty. You hit barriers every single place that you turn. And the government has just ignored the issue, ignored it repeatedly. So hopefully the next government will take this more seriously, because it's really important.
Yeah. I mean, I'm also happy for the ones where, the changes that have happened, the ones, who are obviously going to benefit from those changes, because, all of the universal
I'm not going to lie,
situation-
I was a bit bitter.
I was a bit bitter.
I was a bit like, oh, could they not have done this 3 years ago? But no, like for example, like Tneek being pregnant now, this is her 4th pregnancy. So she's going to see a drastic difference in like what it's like to put your child in childcare in comparison to her 3 other children, which, I'm very happy for the future mums. They need this.
Definitely. They do need it. They do need it, but at the same time, we also there's a lot to fix as well still. Like the plans are great, but the funding that the government are providing is not enough to deliver what they've said they're going to provide. And childcare professionals are still on the lowest possible wage you can imagine for doing the most important job that there is, and the working conditions are appalling. And inevitably we're hemorrhaging staff left, right and centre, because they get paid more to work in Asda than they do doing this really difficult
raising the next generation of people. Like, it's crazy
that they're going to need in Asda.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So there's a lot of work still to do on the childcare system to get it right, but we're moving towards it working for everybody.
They're at least acknowledging it's flawed now, which is a progress.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, before we wrap up, we've asked some badass mums from previous seasons to send in a question for you. And so you can pick out of 1 or 2, and I'll share what they had to say.
1.
Okay, so this came from Camilla Rose. She was one of the hosts in season 1. She has 1 son and 1 daughter, and she said, tips on juggling. How do you juggle maintaining the house, the school runs, and work?
I don't.
I feel like, do you know what? Someone said that to me. You make it look so easy. I said, I'm literally winging it every day.
Everybody is, surely, aren't we all? Like, I mean, I don't. I'm one of those parents at the school gate where, when it's own clothes day, my kids turn up in the school uniform still, and everyone's like, of course, she's done it again. I said to one of the parents the other day something about the different types of parents that you get. You always have somebody who seems like they're totally on it, like they know everything, they have all of the information. And then you have
costumes, like when they have the costume days, and I've just bought something off Amazon, and they come in with these elaborate costumes, and I'm like, how did you find the time to make that? What is going on? It's like a new costume every term as well, every half term even.
Yeah, I am not one of those parents. I'm the opposite. I'm the one who never knows what's going on, who, when it's, if I have worked out fancy dress, I'll just put them in a bin bag or something and send them. And then, always forgetting stuff. So winging it. And I think we all are. And I think that's fine to admit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Reuben finds it funny. Oh, Joeli, thank you so much for spending some time with us. I think like your wisdom and your experiences are priceless, and I know a lot of mums listening are going to connect to so much of what you said and really take a lot of advice and get in touch with Pregnant and Screwed when they need you as well.
Yeah, do. Please do. Make sure you pick up the phone. I know it can be really hard. And even if you just want to talk to somebody about, like, you feel like somebody's been a bit weird with you or whatever, then it's all mums on the phone who get it, and they're there to listen and to talk to you. And it's hard, and you can feel gaslit constantly. So, just give us a call. It's free and nice to chat.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me, ladies.
We'll be back for another episode, but don't forget in the meantime to like, follow, subscribe, and share. Tell a mum.